Hey everybody, Asher here, and today we're going to be talking about Stellaris, or more specifically, what is Stellaris? A game that I've been very excited about for a while. A lot of people have. It's made by Paradox Interactive, who you may have heard of from Crusader Kings 2, or from Europa Universalis 4, a little bit of a mouthful. But Stellaris is a grand strategy game in space, and I'm sure there could be some dramatic echo there. But why does that exactly matter, and why is that make me so excited, so interested? Because it's the game I've probably been looking forward to most that's coming out this year. Just a quick rundown for the game. It is a grand strategy game, but it also does have a lot of 4X elements. It has deep diplomacy, and also there's some really interesting decision making that you'll have to do as a leader in later games that is really divergent from whether it's space 4X games like Endless Space or whether it's something like Civ 5. But pretty much how the game boils down is sort of three phases. You have your beginning phase where it's just you and your home world, and then you get to do the 4X things of explore, expand if you find other people out in space, exterminate them, research different techs, things like that. And then once your borders kind of fill out, you get to a very more Europa Universalis kind of game where there's border tensions, you have to deal with everything else. I guess it's what's really interesting to me for Stellaris as a point is that it takes the sci-fi realm and turns it into a very crowded universe. I guess in a way a lot like Distant Worlds or something like that. But I think that's probably the part that's most appealing to me. We'll talk about a few specific things in just a second, but I do want to point out that Paradox games are known for their learning curve. Supposedly Stellaris has a very advanced tutorial, kind of where Paradox has learned from some of their issues in terms of people learning how to play Crusader Kings 2. In fact, this game plays a lot more like Europa Universalis 4, which, for those of you who have not played that game and don't necessarily know what that means, essentially it is focused on you controlling your nation, controlling your space empire, things like that, instead of being focused more on like individual regimes, or if you've seen any pictures from Crusader Kings 2, there's lots of issues in terms of like hereditary, who inherit your kingdom, things like that. So it's more like EU4, and you can go, you can explore, you can expand, but there are some other features that do matter too. There are lots of different characters. Now granted, they don't live, die, have children. They do live and die, but there's some of the ones that really have, at least from what I've been looking into the game so far, stand out to me are scientists. Now there are other space 4X games and space grand strategy games that have scientists, but the difference in Stellaris is that they also control the exploration ships. So in that sense, you have scientists that are going out there doing research in the field. And there's a lot of different things called anomalies in the game. They're kind of like little quests. You find a planet has an anomaly on it. You can send a scientist to research, inspect it. Maybe it's something that any scientist can do. Maybe you need someone who's really advanced to get it. But there's a lot of little story arcs, or like I said, mini quests that will come out of that. You also do have leaders, and leaders are, I guess, a little bit more standard fare to a point, but they work within the other system, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Now, there are individual leaders that can live and die, same with the scientist, and they provide bonuses to your empire. They can provide bonuses to your military fleets and things like that. So, I mean, that's all pretty standard, but what the game kind of turns on ahead a little bit is the POP system, or the population system. A lot of other space games, space grand strategy games, Endless Space and Distant Worlds Universe kind of come to the mind the most for this. There's not a lot to do on the planetary level for actually managing your empire. You pretty much have planets and whoopity-doo, there we go. Are the people happy, unhappy, pull a slider for the win. Now what makes this game different is that you have individual pops with individual thoughts, individual needs. There's different ethics and sort of feelings, tendencies that people have. And if they're further out from your empire, they'll change. If they have, if they come in contact with other alien races and you have mixed populations on planets, they can come to a head, especially if people are xenophobic or scared of other things that aren't them. So that's pretty fascinating, and it manifests itself in a few ways. You can have some pops that will rise up to possibly be leaders. You can also have pops that if you piss them off enough, they will actually decide, hey, you know what, we don't like this. We want to have our own planet. We want to have our own system. And in that way, I guess it does play a little bit like Crusader Kings to a point, because there is an intrigue system. It's a little scaled down compared to Crusader Kings, at least my experience, but you can still do things like try and pay them off, bribe them. You can assassinate the leader and see if a Hydra doesn't appear. But there's a lot of things that go on with the pops that make sort of the ground level of the Empire. It's not just, okay, here's space, here's your planets, and you have this really big, expansive universe. You have to do the micromanagement as well as the macro management. So I think that's very interesting. So that's one reason that I'm actually very excited about Stellaris, is the population. Another thing that is very interesting to me is that there are different forms of travel. Now, you may say, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. There's been plenty of space games. They've had plenty of different types of FTL travel. But other than like varying the speed, I haven't seen games that really try and do different modes of travel on the same map. And there's 3 in Stellaris. Flying around with the warp drive, flying around with the hyperdrive, and using wormholes. You get to select what your Empire uses at the beginning, but the whole space, the whole playthrough is not locked into just one, which makes multiplayer games really interesting. Stellaris, up to 32 players multiplayer simultaneously, they say. But just to briefly run down the differences here, warp drive is about like you'd expect, point A to point B. You can fly, it's a little slower, it takes a lot of energy, but there's no limitations. Hyperdrive, a lot faster, but in that way, it's a lot like endless space in that there's only certain lines or hyperlanes between stars that you can get to. So it's possible 2 stars may be close to each other, but the hyperlanes go straight around, or it could be there's an arm of the galaxy that is sort of choked off and there's only one hyperlane that you can go through. So you can fortify that and defend yourself from other people, or you could be screwed because someone else has fortified that. It's an interesting trade-off because hyperdrives do go a lot faster. The other one that is really interesting to me, and I'm very curious how it will manifest in the final build, is the wormhole generator, where you literally can fly from point A to point B, assuming you have your wormholes connected, but the distance and the size of your fleet determines how long it takes to actually open up a wormhole from point A to point B. So if you're trying to send a whole massive military fleet to another location, you could be sitting around for a while. So that's interesting. It's a risk that Paradox has taken, but I think it's something that really touches on the fact that the space 4X genre has become pretty stale. You have like Star Drive 2, Galciv 2, Galciv 3, other games as well that have just kind of come out and they've done the same thing, kind of done the same thing again. And I do appreciate that both with Pops and with the form of travel that Paradox is doing something different with Stellaris. And I think that's something that the game really needs. And another thing that's the game does, I don't know if it's necessarily different than all of these games, but it's something that I think is going to play out very differently depending on your playthroughs, is that they've introduced or discussed, actually shown in some of their live streams, fallen empires as well as neophyte empires. Now, fallen empires are something that you may have read about if you've looked at any Stellaris previews. The game, just to give a brief summary, the game starts off with a simultaneous start, which is very much unlike EU4 or Crusader Kings 2. But there's a giant empire or 2 or 3 or more, depending on your map size, that are sitting out there that aren't really interested in expanding. They have their own goals, their own agendas in mind. Usually it's linked to kind of in-game disasters, which is another thing kind of worth discussing in its own video as we get more information. But pretty much there are some in-game events, like if you research AI technology too far, you may piss off a fallen empire, because who knows, they've had experience in the past, they may know that technology is dangerous, and they'll send their super advanced war fleets out to get you. So there's these kind of like big rule enforcers. If you try and colonize a place that a fallen empire considers a holy site, might make them angry, might have them actually try and crush your empire like a bug. So I think that's an interesting, once again, it's a big, wide universe. And kind of to that end, and this is alluded a little bit in the Stellaris teaser trailer that they put out at Game Developers Conference. There's also neophyte empires, which is something that I haven't heard too many people talk about, but it is something that is fascinating to me. You do have your parallel starts with the other empires that are going on the same time as you, but you'll also run into sometimes planets that'll have people that discover FTL flight after you do. Now, they may use one system or another, but you run into them where they're pretty much new, and you get to be that big bad that's like, oh, well, I'm going to smack you down like the fly that you are. Or you can kind of bring them into you. There's even options in the game to what's called uplift primitive civilizations. So that if you find, it's literally the 2001 thing. You drop not exactly drop the monolith on people, but you can find even just cave-dwelling races and rise them up all the way to spacefaring. Granted, it takes a really long time to do it, but it's nice that they give you the option to do that. So really, with you starting out with other people, the universe gets crowded fast, but having some of this old guard and some of these new guards around here really makes it feel like it's more alive, at least from once again I've seen so far. So Stellaris, it comes out May 9th. It's already up for pre-order on Steam, or you can buy it directly from Paradox if you prefer to support the developer directly. But I think, kind of in closing, while I am excited about things like the different forms of FTL travel, things like POPs making it more than just a planet management simulator, and different sizes of empires, different varieties of opponents, I think probably the part that gets me the most with Stellaris and makes me most interested is that, as I said before, Space 4X and Space Grand Strategy, as little of a genre as that's been done, has gotten kind of stale. There's some games that do some things pretty well. There's some games that do some things well and some other things poorly. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And at least from what I've seen so far, Stellaris may not be the game that hits a home run in every single little checkbox or anything, but I do think it is going to provide a robust experience and maybe fill a niche that hasn't really been filled yet. So, grand strategy in space, you get to form your own empire, create your own history instead of playing in history. I'm excited. I hope you are too, and we're going to talk about this game more. There's a few dev diaries that I'm going to be synthesizing, kind of boiling down for you all here, in case you missed some of the preview nuggets that have been trickled out by the developers over the past few months. So that's it for now. This is Asher, talking about Stellaris. What is Stellaris? It is a game. It is coming out in May. I hope to see you playing it too, but we'll talk about it again in the days to come. Thanks for watching. See you next time.